What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Dream a Little, the podcast that's all about helping you feel confident about your ABDL side so that you can share it with that special person in your life. Today, we're going to be covering what my family and friends actually think about my ABDL podcast, so stay tuned if this interests you. Today's episode is sponsored by my brand new podcast, Dream a Little Bigger. It's a weekly show where TK and I share our experience with more intimate details of our dynamic and how we balance kink and vanilla life. You can tune into this weekly podcast and get access to over 17 exclusive episodes at patreon.com/dreamalittle. Shout out to Chico. Welcome to the Patreon family, and thank you so much for joining. If you haven't yet told your partner about ABDL because you have no idea where to start, don't worry, I've got you. Head over to thelittlelounge.com and download my free guidebook, Introduction to Coming Out Kinky. I'll walk you through the entire process. It's 100% free to download the guide, and you'll get subscribed to my weekly tips and tricks via newsletter to help you get through the process. All right, I won't make you wait any longer. Let's just get started. First, I wanted to quickly cover who actually knows about my podcast. If you didn't already know, I podcast full-time now. It hasn't always been easy to explain what I do, but over the past couple years, I've kind of mastered the art of explaining what I do without giving away too much information, because I'm not one of those people who is totally out and about just shouting it from the rooftops that I'm an ABDL. I'm a very private person in real life, even though I share a lot of details here. So basically everyone in my life knows that I have a podcast. And the way that I explain it to them is that, yeah, I have a podcast and it's one of the top rated in the health and sexuality category on iTunes. And at this point, people are very interested to know more. And depending on my relationship with said person, I will either just leave it at that, or if they have some questions, like most people will ask, well, what's it about? And I'll usually answer by saying something. I could say something as vague as I help people with their relationships. But if I know this person well and I know that they're sexual beings and open-minded, I'll give a little more info, and I'll just kind of say something like, hey, well, you know how some people have different taboo kinks or fantasies that they want to try in the bedroom, but maybe they have a hard time talking about it, and people will generally be like, yeah. I'll be like, well, I help those people share their kinks and fantasies with their partners. And so far, everyone has been very supportive and very interested in the idea. And a lot of times the number one response I get is, wow, that's so cool. You know, think I could really use your help. What's it called? I'd love to give it a listen and get you some more downloads. And to that, I always reply, you know, I'm actually a really private person and I disclose a lot of details about my relationship with TK on the show. So for that reason, I go by an alias and I don't share the name with anyone. And then people are just like, oh, okay, well, I could get you more downloads though. And I'm like, and I just laugh because even though no one in my real life knows what the show is called, or I've never really told anyone, you know, here we are at almost 1 million downloads. And when I mention that, people are very impressed and I get, you know, more and more confident every time I explain it to someone. But of course, it's still a challenge to share with people who are maybe older or a bit conservative. And, you know, as I'm getting older, I'm realizing it shouldn't matter what anyone thinks. This is my life and I'm helping people and I love what I do here on the show. It makes me happy. So it's been a process coming around to the idea. And at first, it was a lot harder to explain it to the really, really important people in my life. But I've kind of found a way to go around it. So there are some people who actually know the podcast name. They know what I talk about on the show, like the details of it. They know that I'm into ABDL. And, you know, there are just a few people that I trust enough that I will open up and share that information. Really, there's just a handful that I truly get to know before I let them in. Other than that, there are 2 other people who recently discovered my podcast without me giving them that information. I'm going to talk about that more in a little bit. So now that we've covered what everyone knows about my podcast and, you know, that only a few people know the details, I'm going to share what my family really thinks about me podcasting. I know some people are super open with their family about everything, and even some people reach out to me like, how do I tell my family I'm into ABDL for whatever reason? But that is not the dynamic that I have with my family. I love them. I'm really close with them, but I would never feel comfortable sharing any bedroom fantasies around the dinner table. And that's probably how most people listening would feel about that too. So, with that being said, my parents are accepting and supportive without prying. And I think that's because they know, because I've mentioned that this is in the health and sexuality category. My parents really don't ask too many questions other than, how many downloads does it have and how are things going? And, just very high level questions. Sometimes I do think that, I don't know if this is true. This is my own insecurity, I guess. I do think that sometimes maybe they get a little disappointed that I quit my hairstyling career, but I don't even know if that's true. I could just be projecting my own insecurities. I just assume that it's probably easier to explain that your daughter is a hairdresser than a health and sexuality podcaster. But, of course, it is what it is. But because the nature of what I talk about on the show, and with me not wanting to talk about my sex life with my parents, or really I really only open up about, my sex life with people I feel comfortable with, which is ironic considering I have this podcast and that, TK and I are so kinky and we're into group play. But we honestly, in real life, we only open up to people we're potentially going to play with. I don't know how to explain it other than that. I like that people aren't prying though. Like my family, it doesn't pry, honestly, because in a way, the fact that people in my life don't know about this show, it gives me the freedom to say and do things that I otherwise would probably not talk about. And I'll just end the family section by just saying the person who knows the most details would be my sister. She knows, a good amount, and she really thinks it's cool. So it's really nice to have her support. So what do my friends think about my podcast? I've talked about this on the podcast before, but my friends who know about my ABDL side are really, really supportive. They might tease me in a joking way, but they love me to death. And they're the kind of solid friends that I knew that their opinion wouldn't change of me. They're also very open-minded and they're sexual beings themselves, so I knew they would be understanding. When you meet someone and you get to know them after talking to them for a bit, you can really tell if they are a sexual being or not. And, those are the people I vibe with. However, with that being said, there are a couple of people who I did not openly share my podcast with, and they just figured it out. So that is super fun. This actually only happened a few months ago, and it's the first time I'm talking about it on the show, and really in general, first time I'm talking about it in a long time. Basically, the couple that TK and I live with found out about the podcast. To give you a little backstory, the girl must have, overheard TK and I talking. I'm not really sure how it happened because normally we are very careful about not disclosing any details when we're talking. We'll kind of skirt around things. We'll use acronyms and stuff because, our privacy is very important. But somehow she found out about it. So how I found out that she found out was, back a few months ago, TK and I were talking. We're discussing some kinky stuff in the car when he mentioned that his brother told him that his girlfriend is very vanilla. Those are our roommates, TK's brother and his girlfriend. And so obviously, I know that she's probably a very vanilla girl, but the fact that TK and his brother were talking about kinks at all was kind of a weird thing for me because we've lived for a while now, and I can tell they're just not very kinky. And normally TK's brother would never entertain a discussion about kinks. So I just asked him, I didn't really think much of it, but I just asked, hey, how did you guys end up talking about kinks? I was really interested to know how the conversation got started, because up until that point, they hadn't really had any discussions like that. And that's when TK filled me in that his brother's girlfriend had actually found my podcast. And apparently, she was very confused at first, which is understandable. And she actually brought it to TK's brother's attention. She said something along the lines of, "Hey, I don't want this to change your opinion about your brother, but I think you should see this." And that's one of the reasons why this experience hurt a lot. Not only did she do some digging and go out of her way to find out what I do, but she even risked changing her brother's opinion about TK, her boyfriend's opinion about TK. And I don't know, it just rubbed me the wrong way. And luckily for us, TK's brother was very accepting and understanding. In fact, he said he was actually relieved because he thought what I did would be something worse. Like, well, I don't know, when people hear like, oh, health and sexuality podcast, like they might just like jump to porn, but obviously that's not what I'm doing. And, his brother ended up telling TK the whole story, and then TK filled me in shortly after. And right off the bat, it felt like an invasion of privacy. The best way I could explain it was like, imagine someone was house sitting for you, and it was kind of just like a known thing that there was a room that you shouldn't enter. It was a very private room. In fact, the door to that room had a lock on it. And imagine your house sitter overheard where you keep the keys and snuck into the room while you were away. That's honestly the best way that I could describe how I felt. At first, I was shocked. And then I was angry. But most of all, I was annoyed. I'm not the type of person to be digging for information on people. It's one thing to be curious and do digging, but then to take what you learn and share it with someone else. I just don't understand that because it's not something I would do. And the reason why it bothered me even more was because up until that point, she had never even shown an interest in what I did. Like, at least before you do digging, like, I feel like you should go to the person and be like, "Hey, so I'm really curious to know what you do. Would you mind sharing that information with me?" Or something like that. Regardless, the people that I love and the people that I trust the most know the information that they need to know. And some know more than others because they did digging, and some know more than others because I've opened up to them and I really, really trust them. The true friends I have opened up to willingly have all been super supportive. They've always known that I'm a sexual being and I'm kinky, so this wasn't really a surprise to them in any way. The bottom line is that someone that is hanging out with you or dating you for the right reasons, they aren't going to let something as small as being into ABDL ruin your relationship with them. And if that is the case, then maybe you weren't meant to be friends in the first place. So just always be careful who you open up to, because your story is special and not everyone deserves to hear it. So always be sure someone has earned the right to hear your story before you open up to them. All right, well, that basically sums up who in my life knows about ABDL and what they actually think about it. I don't know if you guys found this relatable, but if so, I would love if you could reach out to me on Twitter @DaddyIWantThis and tell me a little bit about your story and who in your life knows, and if you've ever been exposed, I'd love to hear about it. So until next time, my friends, I hope you have a great day.